Alright guys, so as I'm sure you're all aware by now, when it comes to Genshin Impact, progression is the name of the game. We go out of our ways to get these characters and level them up, get them stronger, advance them for the sake of being able to do more and more incredible things. And it is for this reason that beyond simply glorifying the upcoming characters and such, I feel there is a need to emphasize the new enemies as well, because really and truly, these enemies are the reason that we get stronger, because they are very powerful and are progressively getting more and more capable. And so with the ever exciting new region of INAZUMA coming to us with Genshin Impact Update 1.7, there are of course a plethora of new enemies to look forward to. And so with this video in particular, we will be going over every new enemy we know to be on the way with Update 1.7 in the region of INAZUMA. Now do bear in mind that this information is not only subject to change, but again, INAZUMA is a region, and so the possibility of more enemies to be had even past 1.7 is certainly a possibility. In fact, it is more than likely. Now, unfortunately, to avoid divine wrath here on YouTube, we will have to actually refrain from using any images or video of what we have of these new enemies, but even still, we will be discussing everything extensively, what we can expect and what we do have currently. And this works out fine because, as per usual, the vast majority of new adversaries don't deviate too far from the pre-established and instead serve to simply be new variants on what already exists. And so with all that being said, let's get into this. Now, before going into each and every one of these new enemies individually, we need to cover some of the more blanket summations and deductions to be had about many of the creatures that inhabit this region. So first and foremost, it has been stated that pretty much all of INAZUMA's small monsters have high HP, a sort of noticeable difference from the monsters that we have encountered previously. And at that, throwing bigger health pools on minor enemies is certainly one way to upscale a game's difficulty, but it's typically more of a quick and momentary fix as opposed to a methodical and or lasting change. So I suppose for something like this, we'll just have to feel it out. Right now, a whole lot of people are able to achieve some pretty insane damage numbers with their characters, so it's hard to say how impactful, beneficial, or negative something like this will be definitively without experiencing it for ourselves firsthand. Besides that, we have the fact that all machine type monsters, that's ruin creatures and such, have high physical resistance. Now this deduction isn't too surprising to me, as ruin creatures tend to actually have higher resistances when it comes to physical attacks. And so I for one take this to say that the new ruin creatures are more than likely to have their physical damage resistances skewed towards the ruin guard side of the spectrum as opposed to the ruin hunter side. And with that frame of reference, I don't mind this too much because they all get bodied regardless. Beyond that, we have the statement that all mobs have some manner of teleportation. Now this I can imagine being a bit frustrating, a bit annoying if everything is just zipping around. When you miss a big attack because something teleported just in the nick of time, that can be a little annoying, but it is what it is. Only so many things can teleport, but if everything is teleporting, okay, that can be a bit obnoxious. And so hopefully it's not as bad as it sounds immediately on paper. But if it is, then I suppose that means that characters who are good at crowd control, like Venti for instance, will stand to possess even more value in due time. And then lastly, we have the declaration that monsters here in INAZUMA have high physical damage resistance commonly. And so characters that primarily rely on physical damage will have a hard time. And this is something that we are all sort of aware of as the game is right now, that physical damage is the worst kind of damage simply because the game so heavily incentivizes elemental reactions and of course the use of elemental attacks. With that being said, however, to offset that difference, they give you oodles of noodles when it comes to physical damage. This is why characters like Eula are able to just nuke everything on screen. And so as someone who uses a character like Eula rather profusely, this is a bit unfortunate, but with the kind of numbers that I am able to drop with that character, just lowering that a bit, I'm still gonna be killing everything, so I don't mind all too much. Hopefully this doesn't just like throw certain characters in the dirt when it comes to their physical damage outright if they are not on the same scale as Eula, but again, this is something that we will have to try out for ourselves to better understand and be able to quantify. And so yeah, that is all the general information that you need to know. And so now we are going to be getting into the individual new creatures that are to be seen in this new region. First up, we have the ever expected Pyro Hypostasis. Now, this flaming Rubik's Cube does not deviate too far from what its other elemental cousins are able to do, and so your imagination doesn't need to be all too vivid in order to properly surmise what it will be like in combat. But in regards to further specifics, the moves to be expected from it will be Pyro Punches, the spinning wheel move, and things like that. Again, nothing too unorthodox. In its final phase, this thing will put up some shields for itself that are said to be exceedingly difficult to break without the use of Hydro. So consider getting some of those Hydro characters up a bit. As for how it'll be concluded, you'll be able to beat it in a fashion similar to its Electro cousin, with those elemental shards that need to be taken down with elemental attacks. Now, I for one will be kicking this hotbox around for a while, seeing as the ascension material it drops, Smoldering Pearl, is necessary for Yoimiya's progression, who, as stated in a previous video, is a must-have for me beyond the whole whale thing. From there, we move on to new Hilly Churro types, and first up we have the Electro Hilly Churro Grenader. Now, we already have the Electro Hilly Churro Shooter, who shoots out arrows and such, but this one will be throwing out slimes as typically expected from Grenaders. And to properly match the element here, we are talking about Electro Slimes. And now at this stage of the game, as we continue to progress, we will be seeing our enemies continue their progression when it comes to elemental reactions against us, which makes things a bit more challenging, but of course very fun in that way as well. From there, we have the Crackling Axe Matachurl. We already have the Blazing Axe Matachurl, but here, that Blazing Axe, that Pyro Axe, turns into Electro. Thirdly, we have Electro Samaterals, what to me looks like the coolest of the bunch by far. The purple makes it look more ominous and impressive, and with this, all that's left for this line of creatures will be the Pyro one and we will be complete. Then lastly, we have the Thunderhelm Lawachurl, which, as you might imagine, is similar to the Frostarm and Stonehide, but uses Electro instead. Now, I for one am a fan of this design in particular. Unlike the other Lawachurls currently available in the game, this one is a bit more fluffy when it comes to its hair, and so it kind of looks like a purple sheep with glowing purple eyes and glowing purple horns. However, this then brings us to the Abyss Order. Now, interestingly enough, this category of enemy has only received a single edition in the form of Electro-Abyss Mages. What are your typical Abyss Mages, albeit purple and of course Electro. Now, I have always found these creatures to be pretty cute, and this one is no different. For me at least, all these new purple baddies are pleasant on the eyes. But although this is the only new Abyss Order enemy we know to be coming right now, there is to be an addition to Abyss Mages across the board. And that is the inclusion of a new secondary ascension material type known as Statuettes, which come in 3 variations. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't uncover the use of these things, but the description of the legendary variant, Deadly Statuette, is as follows: a carving that emanates an evil energy with no indication of what it's truly made of. Simply focusing on it evokes dark whispering inside your very soul. So yeah, all the more reason to hunt these guys, I suppose. But listen, the Abyss Order aren't the only group with only one addition, as the Fatui are the very same. Here we have a new type of mage, although you probably wouldn't be able to tell by the name alone, as she breaks the name trend and instead goes with Mirror Maiden. And although her name may not convey as such, she will be a Hydro enemy. Now, a reason for this deviance from the prior name scheme would be that she does not command Sins at all. And be that as it may, the full extent of her kit isn't entirely available to us, but we've been able to glean that she is capable of producing Hydro AoEs on the ground with up to 3 at a time. She is furthermore capable of marking our characters. She teleports, although she does so with a diamond shape as opposed to what we are familiar with other mages doing. She can shoot Hydro Blasts at us, and she is said to be insanely tanky. Like, she can take twice as much punishment as her peers. Visually, this is a beautiful model that is certainly model height in heels, as she is very, very tall. There's also a sort of regal presence to her, and yeah, the Fatui just got a whole lot better as far as I'm concerned. Next, we have some new treasure hoarders. Liu Liu, a blonde with a mouth covering, Raptor, a maskless Kakashi wannabe, Carmen, a bigger guy, not to be confused with Eric Cartman, with gray hair that to me looks to be a cross between Super Saiyan 2 and Jimmy Neutron. And finally, the treasure hoarder's boss, who aside from the Fatui, is the very first humanoid female enemy we can fight in the game. she wears a hood and has her pale purple hair kept in a long braid that drapes over her left shoulder. Now these guys are not technically monsters, so that high physical damage resistance we spoke of previously does not apply here, as they are pretty susceptible to it indeed. For the magical beast section, we have the new Electro Whopper flowers. Pretty self-explanatory, these guys in particular of course being purple, but to me seem to be the most intense of their type visually. And that's all because of the eyes, but around the eyes there is a sort of pattern that has the same shape as a Primo gem, so I can imagine a few summoning rituals stemming from this one. Now from here I want to get into the new ruin creatures because these guys sound pretty intense. First up, we have the new 40 resin world boss, Perpetual Mechanical Array. What is described to be like a cross between a ruin creature and a hypostasis. This thing unloads some heavy missile fire and is apparently on the more difficult side on account of its insane health pool. The thing about this fight is that you can't just beat it down to nothing, as at a certain point it then enters what is referred to as absolute defense mode, wherein several of its minions known as ruin soldiers then emerge. And until all these guys are defeated, the array will remain invincible. But once you manage to do so, its core will be paralyzed and its defenses will be slightly lowered. Now, the location of this boss in particular is kinda noteworthy as it resides at the end of an underwater maze in the middle of the ocean. A maze full of ruin enemies, mind you. But for many of us, this bonus will be yet another one to brutalize, as it will be dropping perpetual hearts. What is Ayaka's ascension material, and judging by many of your comments in the past, a lot of you guys have been saving up for her for a very long time, so maybe you'll want to drop a portable waypoint. And listen, a location to farm ruin materials sounds good to me. But to follow this thing, we have the Ruin Cruiser, what may be described to be a pyramidal flying machine. This thing itself makes it rain with shots as well, and also unleashes a number of minions, however in a bit more of a specialized manner. Once it goes into formation mode, it becomes invulnerable. The minions it releases being first, a Ruin Destroyer, what is visually like a little tower embedded in the ground, second, a Ruin Defender, a crab-like robot with yellowish-orange hologram-like shields that are very Breath of the Wild flavored, and lastly, Ruin Scout, what is kind of like a jellyfish that has a charge cannon and orbs of energy that circle around it. Now I will say that dealing with these sorts of things kind of reminds me of Oceanid, which for me at least isn't the best thing ever. That boss in particular being one that I perpetually dread simply because of how painfully slow it is to complete. But yeah, that just about does it for the ruin creatures, and so now we will move on to a new type of creature known as the Nobushi. As for their names, we have Jintoban, Hitsukeban, and Kikoban. And these are some tough looking dudes. They do not look happy at all. And at that, I am imagining these guys to be vagabonds or Ronin. But Ronin won't be the only ones to worry about, as we will actually have some proper samurai enemies as well by the name of the Kairagi. We have Kairagi Dancing Thunder and Kairagi Fiery Might, who of course use Electro and Pyro respectively. Now we don't yet have much information on the Pyro one just yet, but we do have it in the way of the Electro one, and I don't imagine there's going to be a huge deviance between the two. The attacks of Kairagi Dancing Thunder are Electro range slashes, Electro whirlwinds where he spins around, as well as strong Electro forward slashes. And so what I would say is imagine a smaller Magu Kenki. Now interestingly enough, the Shogunate seems to have a variant of these guys in their possession, who instead go by Ochimusha. We have Ochimusha Ensorcelled Thunder and Ochimusha Cankered Flame. And I'm not too sure about the differentiation between these two groups. Perhaps it is just in name alone and placement in regards to what sort of allies they will have with them, but I can't say for sure. But to finally close this out and wrap up all of these new enemies that we have some members of the Shogunate's armed forces. There is the Shogunate Infantry, Shogunate Infantry Captain, and Sangonomiya Cohort. Now, I for one am not expecting these guys to be all too special, but rather a copy and paste of the Millilith Soldiers and Millilith Sergeants to be found in Liwa. And so with that, last but not least, we have the Adjutant Samurai, a type of higher ranking military personnel who is loyal to the Shogunate. All in all, these are to me some really interesting enemy additions to the game, which is only just that much crazier when you consider that we are only just now entering Act 2 of this story. Guys, this is only just the beginning, and there is a whole lot more to look forward to with Genshin Impact. And so hopefully you'll be willing to dive alongside us as the depths of the game continue to grow by subscribing to Whalestat with notifications on. And in the comments, let us know which enemy you are most looking forward to. With that, I have been your host, Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.